Everyone loves a rags to riches story, and there is no shortage of them. But we usually hear from larger and more famous businesses. In this podcast, Everyday Business, we focus on small to medium-sized businesses and their successes to show our audience that you do not need to be big, famous, or glamorous to be successful. Join me, attorney Danya Shakfeh, to hear stories of everyday business owners like you and me and how they built their businesses. Today we have joining us Ayat Shukairy, co-founder of Invesp and a recognized expert on marketing strategy and an in-demand speaker who has presented at marketing conferences throughout the world. Ayat is the co-author of Conversion Optimization and Amazon.com best-selling book. Ayat co-founded her company Invesp with her husband back in 2006. Invesp has the second dedicated conversion optimization company in North America. At Invesp, they help clients optimize conversions and revenues of their websites. In other words, they help their clients save and make lots of money. Welcome, Ayat. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Looking forward to it. How are you?
I'm well. It's been crazy times, as anybody who is not living under a rock would know, between COVID and as we were discussing a little bit before, the kids being at home and how we manage. But I think the world is adapted and we've kind of just learned to live with it the best way that we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
How have you been managing so far?
It's been all right. I mean, you just have to kind of balance things and take things one day at a time. Otherwise, I think, and hopefully, again, like there's light at the end of the tunnel and things will get better, but, you just have to kind of go with it right now and live through it.
Yes. I think that's everyone's, sentiment. So first, why don't you just start telling us about yourself and Invesp as a company?
So, again, thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this with you. I started Invesp actually in 2006. When I started it, I had started it absolutely alone because at the time I was learning about kind of online marketing, and I found that a lot of potential customers were very interested in this concept of conversion optimization. At the time, it wasn't necessarily called that, or customers didn't even know that term. But the idea was that they wanted to improve their websites. They wanted to make sure that their conversion rates were much higher, so more visitors that would come to their websites would actually make a purchase. They wanted to make sure, of course, that they were increasing their revenue. And so there was a lot of emphasis back in early 2000s on search engine optimization. So it's getting the visitors and the eyeballs to the website, but there wasn't a lot of emphasis on that experience once they do get to the website. And that's obviously part of the process. You can't really think about just getting people to a specific place, but then not creating an experience that's really going to entice them and persuade them to actually make a purchase. So that's what I started focusing on. And then when I saw that there was like a lot of, like openness to this, and a lot of the clients that I did have, because I was doing a lot of SEO copy for them, I expanded it to a business, and, my husband obviously was very supportive at the time, and, he was kind of helping with establishing the business, but he didn't actually fully join me until 2009, when he had, quit his job and decided to go with Invesp full time.
Oh, that's really cool. For some reason I thought you guys had started together. I didn't realize that you actually started it first. So I learned something new today. That's awesome. Why don't you tell us about that day? Like for me, like as a business owner myself, there's kind of that moment, where you're like, I'm just going to do this. So how about you tell us about that day when you're just like, I'm just going to just do this.
Yeah. And it's funny because I never necessarily thought my life would go in this direction. Sometimes things happen in your life where they're so unexpected. You don't anticipate that this is the direction that they're going to go in. And, so, it got to a point where I had several different clients. I was doing at the time just more freelancing, but, I got to the point where there was so many different clients, and my husband and I, we were talking, and he's like, why don't you do something with this, and make it more. And that's, how the concept came about. And at the time when, like I had decided on doing Invest, the idea was maybe it would be a lot more, broad in terms of some of the different marketing activities that I would do for clients. But the more and more, I kind of worked on it, and, like with my husband's kind of, just sometimes he would give kind of his advice. We decided, hey, let's, just focus on conversion optimization. And so I started taking classes, reading books on it. There wasn't a lot of information at the time, just because, again, it was a very new discipline. It wasn't something that was very well known. And even when we would say it to our potential clients, they'd be like, you mean SEO, right? Like, CRO? No. We mean conversion rate optimization, post-click marketing. So, you always have to kind of go through that explanation. I find myself till this day, I have to go through that explanation sometimes. I think people know conversion optimization, but the meaning, I think sometimes people think that it's just, you just focus on the website. You just focus on, increasing conversion rates, but it's a lot more broad than that. And it's not like, that simple approach that I think a lot of people sometimes think.
Yeah, no, I totally know because as you know, like my husband's in the same industry, and I remember when we first got married, I was like, "What's UX?" Like user experience, which I know is like part of the experience of like that. Like when you come to the website, it's like, okay, what now? Is it user friendly? But I would say in the past 10 years, and even in the past 5 years, I've seen an increase in people knowing what like what UX is and what it means to have like a good conversion rate and what all that entails. And even like lawyers now, you're like, oh, UX, and I'm like, wow, you guys know what UX is. Like 10 years ago, they're like, what's UX? So
we're catching up.
now it's becoming more mainstream. So I would say you were definitely ahead of your time, especially I think even more so in the past year with COVID and just more people being forced to use technology. Maybe even now, that concept of user experience is becoming more part of our, like daily use and concern, like when we think about, buying a product or going to a website. So weren't you a teacher before you were doing this?
Yes. So, that was my goal. Like I loved children. I loved education. But then, I had my own child and I thought, okay, I love children, but now I have to focus on my kids and I need to figure out something else. Like I can't be with, kids 20, like at like a school and teach, and then kids at home. Like that's just going to be too much for me. So I had to, at the time, kind of adapt. And I was previously living in Michigan, but then I moved to Houston, Texas. And that's actually where we founded the company. So, like I didn't want to have to reapply for like, the certificate, et cetera. Like I just wanted to do something that was different than education. Like I was kind of ready to move on from teaching. Right. And so then I started picking up freelancing and teaching myself basically marketing. So, again, it was a completely different direction. I never actually imagined that I would end up here today. But, again, like I think I was very intrigued by the concept. I love human psychology. And I thought that, just trying to understand people's mind and trying to figure out ways to convince them to make a purchase or, make that decision of clicking a button, that was really intriguing to me. So, and figuring out the ways to do that and implementing it and seeing that people are actually responding to that, like was just, it kind of sold me right away on doing this and really focusing in on it.
I'm really fascinated by that, the concept of like the self-taught entrepreneur, because I would imagine that, not only do you need to learn information, but you need to know where to get good information because there's so much probably, like bad information out there. So how, as someone who's kind of self-taught, how did you parse the information? Because the thing is, like, you don't know what you don't know, so you won't know what bad information is. So like, how did you learn what was good and what you should avoid? Like, what was that process like?
Well, I mean, the thing is, again, it was like kind of like early 2000s at the time when I was really teaching myself. So the information on conversion rate optimization was scarce. There wasn't a lot out there. You had like kind of like the Eisenberg brothers. They were kind of, like the ones who really dubbed even the concept of, or the name, conversion rate optimization. And so they had books on it. I actually did their training. They had like this training where you'd go to, it was in Austin. And I remember like I had my sister fly all the way from Michigan to Houston to watch my kids so that I could, drive down to Austin and attend training that they had. So, I think knowing who was kind of a leader in the industry helped to make sure that, whatever information that I was getting was pretty accurate. But even the Eisenbergs themselves were still learning because it was a new concept and a new idea, and there was so many different things that were related to it. It wasn't just, like when you talk about, for example, UX, well, I consider CRO kind of like that broader umbrella, and I consider that UX is a part of that, because you can't do, any type of optimization if the UX sucks on a site. You need to make sure that the UX is up to par. You need to make sure that the usability overall in the flow on the website makes sense, and then you can think of more persuasive methods to get the visitor to move forward in the process. So like, again, I think the way that you approach the process is you have to kind of look at who are those leaders within the industry and try to really follow everything that they do, as well as, like, the thing is, with conversion rate optimization, it's a discipline within marketing. So a lot of marketing concepts that you utilize in anything are very applicable in conversion rate optimization. So there's like a plethora of information out there on just marketing in general. And I think just trying to switch that to the online world, that's kind of just the key thing that I have to do, is like, okay, you can read a lot of marketing books, and they're great and they're very helpful in human psychology, because, again, that psychology of trying to convince people to move forward or do something, that's very important also within conversion rate optimization, and then take that information and kind of convert it online. So, again, I was lucky that I started at the infancy of CRO. And that way, like, again, we also became kind of like leaders within the industry, because there really weren't a lot of companies doing what we were doing at the time when we started.
So I guess, just in light of that, like, you might not have an answer to this because of, like what you just said, but did you seek any mentors in your industry? There probably were not that many, but just someone to kind of show you the ropes, or be like, avoid this, do this, or, just to give you an idea, just the overall landscape at least. Or that was just something that was not an option for you?
Yeah, and again, I think, like, ideally, I would have had somebody that was maybe a mentor within the field of conversion rate optimization. But I will tell you that one of my greatest regrets is that I didn't seek out a mentor. And you can seek a mentor, honestly, like any entrepreneur would have been great, but I didn't. And I was very reliant on advice from, my husband, who was really, like, new to everything as well. Or, kind of like some people around me, but I didn't have that one person and that, could say, hey, you should do this, you should do that, and I know that a lot of people that are starting businesses now are having mentors. And I always say, like, I wish I had something at the time. Now it's different. Now I'm a lot more aware, and, seeking out that advice and finding those people has been something that I do. But before, I wasn't aware, because I wasn't in the business world at all. I had no idea. And, you might say, well, obviously that means that you should have sought out a mentor, but I didn't even think of, that concept, like, oh, I need somebody to guide me and to, like, show me the ropes. So, like, again, like, that's something I think that it would have helped a lot of the growing pains that I had. They probably would have, eased up if I had somebody that was helping. So I would advise anybody who's going to start a business to seek out somebody that they can trust, that they can get the right advice from.
I know that. I really relate to not really getting a mentor at the beginning. Personally, I struggled with getting a mentor myself, so I totally relate to that. Like, it does seem obvious, but I think, I don't know if it's because, like, when I started out with my law firm, I was a female with young kids. So I feel like maybe I didn't have time to go do that. It wasn't a priority. Or I feel like maybe people didn't have time for me and my crazy schedule, or just, finding another woman. Like, sometimes men, like, they kind of are in a different zone, especially if they don't have kids at home and they're not, playing that role. So they might not be able to relate to you. So I think I really struggled too at first, just, just the concept of mentor, like, where do I find, do you just walk up to someone and be like, hey, can you mentor me? That's not usually how it works. So I could see why, that's something that wasn't really obvious, or, that's something that you could just, easily do. But I agree. I think nowadays with social media, it's probably a lot easier to find mentors, and, people are pretty open. I think
for a lot of people, like they might be scared to ask someone to, like start that kind of relationship. They might feel like they're a burden or annoying. Maybe that's just me, but I could totally see that as well.
Yeah, but I think also like the
Yeah.
thing is that like when it comes to mentors and trying to find that right mentor, you need to understand the space. And, remember, like I'm very new. I didn't really have any contacts in the business world in general. So I think like there's kind of like that balance, and it's just almost like, well, there wasn't even at the time a way to access those types of people, especially if you don't have any connections, no familiarity, no networking. Like I was like completely like new. And obviously like the more I went to like, conferences and met with different people and met with different, fellow speakers and whatnot, it broadened, that aspect, and it opened up a lot of different doors. And I think I'm sure that anybody who starts a business has that same struggle, is that, well, you're starting the business, you just don't even have a network yet. So how are you going to be able to access these people? So I think, I think there are some tools out there, and again, like, conferences and whatnot, all that kind of stuff helps with meeting other individuals and, finding that right person.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I'm interested in hearing about your journey. So you guys started in Texas, then at one point you actually moved to Turkey, to like, Istanbul. So can you tell me about that? Like why you guys made that transition, and then now you're back in the U.S., right? So like what happened there, and tell me about that experience.
So I founded the company in Houston, Texas. At the time, like I said, my husband was still a software architect. And then we actually moved to Michigan because he was a consultant. He would travel weeks at for like a week and then come on the weekends basically. So I was just like, I don't even know I'm out here in Houston by myself and my family lives all the way in Michigan. I might as well just move there and be close to them. So we ended up moving to Michigan and kind of relocating the business there. And then after a few years in Michigan, again, like my husband at the time, around 2009, he decided to quit his job fully and be with Invesp kind of full time. So that was great, kind of having him and working with him. But then in 2012, my husband kind of made a decision to, look at kind of other opportunities and specifically, obviously there was the Syrian war that happened and the revolution that happened. So he decided to kind of help and assist with that. So that took up a lot of his time. So after, like we were established, we were doing actually really, really well at that point in time. He, kind of decided to be involved with that and help with that effort. And so he was traveling like to Turkey all the time. So for a whole entire year in 2013, he was literally like not there, and I was kind of managing the business and managing the home and trying to do everything by myself. And it was just really difficult. So then I made the decision. I'm like, listen, this doesn't make sense that you're in Turkey most of the year. You come like, just maybe a couple times a year. And it's just it doesn't make sense. So I'm like, let's just go. We'll try to make the best of what we have in Turkey. So when I got to Turkey, we decided, hey, look, we're already still running the business. He's busy with a few things here and there, but like, we can actually establish an international office because we were still servicing some clients in Europe, some clients in India, and some clients in Japan. So, we figured, hey, if we're doing that already and we're servicing these clients that are abroad and there's already that time zone difference, speaking to them from the US is just so much more difficult, like, just getting the time zones right. So having that central location just made so much sense. And we always wanted kind of like an international office. So we're like, this is an opportunity. We're here and we're here. We didn't choose this. We didn't choose to come here and it wasn't like our decision. So why not, make the best of it? So that's when we, we created actually like a separate entity in Turkey. That was just the easiest approach. So we created kind of like Invesp Turkey, and we started hiring employees in Turkey. And till now we have an office in Turkey, which is great because again, like we're able to service clients internationally as a result of that. And it's much easier for them to handle kind of like the time zone difference. So, I mean, it turned out it was something at the time, at that moment, it was such a struggle and it was so difficult. But,
Yeah.
you know, now in retrospect, it worked out for the best, and things, you know, just worked out in the sense that we were able to have that new office. But I will tell you, I mean, our business suffered a lot,
Right.
you know, just because my husband took that time off and he was really like MIA, like he was not there. And he's really, the way that we've structured the business is he's more involved, he's more the sales guy. And
Right.
I'm more the hands-on, I deal with the projects and I'm dealing with a lot of the employees and whatnot. So he just kind of didn't do any sales for a couple of years. So of course, as you can imagine,
That's kind of a problem.
that hurt us just a little bit. So we suffered, and
Yeah.
until this day, I feel like we're still recovering, honestly.
Yeah.
It takes so much time to build up that presence in the market and to have those connections and whatnot. And when you're just
Right.
gone literally for 2 years, you know, it hurts. It hurts.
I mean, I think a lot of businesses go through some pretty bad times and they often come out for the best, which it kind of sounds like it is in your situation. I mean, I'm fascinated by businesses that go through like world wars and depressions. And I saw a business actually, like when I was in Istanbul, there's this Rahab place, right? Like the sweets place that was established in 1887. And I just imagine all the things that they must have gone through, like the fall of the Ottoman Empire, 2 world wars, probably multiple depressions, the Spanish flu, like all these, you know, plagues, and they're still around and they're doing well. So I think it's just, you know, unfortunately, you know, as a like a business owner, that's just like you have a business, but we don't live in vacuums and bubbles. Like there's our lives and there's the world, but you just have to build that resilience and just kind of like go with the tide and see what you can do to keep things afloat, as you know, as to ride out the bad times. Like starting and running your business, was there anything unexpected that you learned about yourself, especially just in light of what you said? You're like, wow, I didn't know I was capable of XYZ, and here I am dealing with it. You know, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect myself to survive that. Like, because it was
Sounds hard.
like, exactly, you feel like you're like a single mom and, you know, like you're just trying to manage the business and it just, I felt very, very alone at the time. So, you know, being able to just kind of pick up and continue on and push forward, you know, even though there was all those circumstances and all those difficult, you know, that my children and dealing with everything that they were going through, because they were dealing with the loss of, you know, their dad. They were seeing him and it was not easy for them. So everything was kind of like an adjustment overall. So that, you know, that period of time, I when I reflect on it, would I have done things differently? Possibly right now, like my older, wiser self, certainly, probably, you know, just to kind of, maybe I should have handled the sales at the time. I don't know. But, you know, nonetheless, I think that I was able to survive it and go through it and still maintain the business and some of the connections that I had.
So you'd say that you're stronger than you thought you were.
Yeah,
I guess,
definitely.
yeah. Capable of more. Yeah.
I wouldn't have imagined myself ever doing something like that and able to kind of get through it. So that, you know, felt really good that I was able to. And when I reflect on it, I'm happy that, you know, I kind of pushed through.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I can totally relate to a lot of what you just said, for sure. So like, given the fact that your husband is your business partner, do you guys, you know, now have rules or protocols where you try to keep your business and your marriage separate, or is that just something that you've kind of given up on, or you know, it's because I can imagine it's hard to separate the two. I mean, I feel like it's a lot like working from home. Like you never really leave home when you're at work, and you never really are at work because you're kind of still at home. So I imagine it's a kind of a similar dynamic. So how do you guys handle that aspect?
You know, like I always tell my husband, I'm like, I don't even know what our marriage looks like without the business. I can't even imagine. Yeah. So, you know, certainly, like, you know, having my husband as my business partner is at times can be very challenging. And one thing I definitely learned about him is that he is a workaholic and he expects everybody to be a workaholic like him, you know, and I'm a mom. I can't just be a workaholic. Like I have to turn off, you know, I make a conscious effort to turn off from work because I just need to have that like headspace. I need to be there present for my kids, for myself, for my sanity.
Yeah. I hear you.
So, so I think that we're just different in that way. So I think we've adapted. I mean, we've been doing this now since 2006. So, and obviously he hasn't joined full time and been there until 2009. However, again, like we've been working with each other for so long on the business. So we've learned kind of each person's quirks. Everybody has kind of like their thing. I definitely struggle sometimes with getting feedback from him. Like I'm not super accepted of like his criticism.
I get that. Yeah. The criticism.
So, again, like, so he's known how to kind of deal with that and make sure that he addresses things in a way that is going to be like, very much more acceptable to me. And then again, like, the way that we separated the business, like in terms of like, what he's focused on, we have a product actually that we, like a software that we launched. So he's responsible for development. He's responsible for sales, and I deal with the projects, and literally he doesn't have anything to do with what I do. And so we kind of separated it in order for us to be able to function and thrive and succeed. Because otherwise, I think if you kind of butt heads at all times, it's going to really like impact the business. It's going to impact the relationship, and it doesn't make sense. And like I said, I do make a conscious effort to turn off. So meaning like I try to turn off from even discussing business with him after hours. It doesn't always work, meaning that like, sometimes things come up in conversation and we'll discuss and we'll talk about them. But we've tried to do things. I mean, in an ideal world, you could kind of separate the two, but honestly, it's so much more difficult to do that. Even we'll go out like on a date night and we'll end up talking about something for work. So, stuff like that does happen. And I don't think we're immune to it, but we just kind of go with it. And it's been working out as long as we kind of, we both have a mutual respect for each other. We both understand what our strengths are, what his strengths are, what my strengths are. And we kind of do it that way. And that's how we've been able to succeed, hopefully, and survive, like as a couple.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I know I have a hard time too. Like, my husband, like we're not business partners, but we talk a lot about business. It's definitely hard just because it's a part of you. And that's just, like, that's what you talk about. You talk about the things in your life and, so it's hard to avoid. Yeah. It's just like, that's what I do. Like, how was your day?
Working with each other. I'm like, we already know this. Like, why are we talking about it again?
I know. I think one of the hardest things I've had to struggle with too, especially since working at home together, is just like asking a question like, how was your day? And it's just like, like when people come home, that's a good question to ask. But when you've been together all day, not even like just being home, like working on different things. So we often do have separate days anyway, because I'm in one office and he's in a different room. But I can imagine like working on the same business, like trying to have that, like, how was your day conversation? It's like, well, how do you think it went? Or you were there. So you kind of have to get creative about like trying to talk about other things, and it really takes like a little extra effort. But, I could see that's, could see how that goes. Like, it's hard to just avoid talking about what you've already been doing, especially if you've been doing it together.
But when you separate things, again, it gets interesting because I don't know everything that's happening with development, for example. I'll ask him questions like that. So, again, like we're not, like there are things that we aren't, or he'll be on like podcasts, or I'll be on a podcast and he'll ask me like how to go. So certainly there are still there is that separation that we have. So it helps.
That's good. Yeah. Just one final question then. Like, so what advice do you have for people who want to get into a field that they're interested in, but they don't have any formal or traditional training in?
So what I would advise people is to read as much as possible, because it helps and it gives you kind of a little bit of an edge over other people. When I actually started, I actually even took some college classes in marketing when I was in Houston, just to give me kind of like a background and some information, because again, like I was coming from a completely different field and going into marketing. I think marketing is a lot more forgiving than other fields. Like obviously if you want to switch to, for something like, medicine or law, you can't really necessarily do that. They're not forgiving fields because you really need to have that degree. Whereas marketing, you have a lot more flexibility, but you need to make connections and get to know people and let people kind of know your name, because otherwise it's a lot more difficult to penetrate, like a very saturated market. So, what I would advise people is, again, read, grow your network, attend. There's so many webinars. There's so much like kind of information out there, especially honestly with the COVID period. People have made an extra effort to even conferences that are usually like, thousands of dollars to attend are now completely free virtually. So that's just kind of like an amazing opportunity for a lot of people that are looking to expand their horizons and understand a little bit more about a new field and possibly see whether or not it would be something for them.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really good advice. Thank you. Well, thank you again, Ayat, for coming and being on my inaugural episode of my podcast. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to spread the word. So thank you again.
No problem. Thank you.